Hi everyone. My name's Sarah Brown. I'm a free-range WordPress developer. I work in kind of flexible teams, usually on different projects with small businesses, social enterprises, startups, and I usually work with events and conferences, but usually behind the scenes. So it's a different experience for me to be up here presenting. I'm really passionate about digital communities, connecting people in online and offline, and user experience. It's a huge subject. So who here has had, Who here has had a bad user experience online in the past week? Yeah. So it stands out to you, right? The thing about good user experience is that it's usually seamless. It goes by unnoticed. Transactions just kind of happen, and in the end, all parties are satisfied. But designing that seamless user experience is like endlessly complicated. So I'm here today with a bit of a model that has worked for me in the past with the clients that I've worked with and the projects that I've worked on to create good user experiences for all the different parties that are involved, and it's based on the relationships between three specific user groups. And you guys, I'm going to be, let's go back to that, I'm going to be talking to you here today as user experience designers, because you're all here at a WordPress conference, so in some point or another you're creating an experience for somebody online, and the lines will get a bit blurred because often when we find ourselves designing an experience for one user, we ourselves are at the centre of an experience that was designed by somebody else or by another user. So let's talk about the topic that I've brought here today. Before I do, I just want to make sure that the experience that I'm focusing on today is yours. So there's a few technical things that I'll bring up and resources and how-tos. And so I was going to put that in a blog post, but that was a really long title. I thought that was a bad user experience. So if you registered this domain, user-centricdesign.com, you can go there, sign up, and I'll send you the slides and links to kind of some of the tutorials for some of the things that I'm going to talk about. So let's talk about the topic. The first thing that I just want to address is when we talk about front and back design, I'm going to be talking a lot about front ends and back ends, and typically people do have a giggle when I comment on what a nice front end have, or like when I call a client and say I need access to your back end. So get that out of the way. But yeah, let's just go through that. User-centric design, designing an experience with the user at the centre, understanding their needs and making sure everything in that experience is in service to that. Front to back, now this is a bit of a trick I've used as like an attention grabber because we often think about, front-end design and development, back-end design and development. Don't necessarily think that this binary way is a good way of looking at it, as you'll see. And then WordPress conference, a lot of us have built our careers on this amazing piece of software, and I'm in that camp as well. So let's look at the users. The first one we think of with websites is the front-end user. That's the person who's accessing the front face of the website, the www dot. The next person we think of is the back-end user in WordPress. That's the person accessing the WordPress dashboard typically and affecting what happens on that front end. And then the third group that I want to talk about is the one that we don't necessarily think of in that binary, and that's the person I'm going to call the industry user or the client. This is the person who that dashboard back-end user is updating the content on behalf of for the front-end user to interact with, and then that in turn affects the livelihood of that industry user or client. So we're still designing the experience for that third person as well. So we see it's like a Venn diagram and we see things overlap. And I'm sure you've all seen the result of what happens when you neglect one group or another. So when we neglect the front end, we could end up with a site that is technically quite good and kind of ticks a few boxes, but is boring and unengaging. When we neglect the back end, we can end up with a site that might look pretty good and everyone's like, oh yeah, this is really cool, but actually it's quite clunky and it's vulnerable to potential security threats. And then when we neglect the client end, we might end up again with a site that seems really great on the surface, but it's not actually delivering value to the client or delivering a return on investment. So I'm going to work through this model from front to back to client and kind of work it in a circle, and you will see as we go through, it's kind of like a fractal. It goes in concentric circles. The more we zoom in, the more we'll see it repeated. So let's start with the shiny stuff, the front end. And this is, as I said, where, as we know, where the front, that front end user is accessing the public face of the site. So this is usually the customer's customer. And there's lots of reasons this can be neglected, and it's not always because, you've not brought in a front-end developer or a graphic designer. Sometimes it comes from the best of intentions. As a user experience advocate, I'm often finding myself saying to these really creative and imaginative graphic designers, you've designed something really cool, your navigation interface looks amazing, but really don't think anyone's going to know how it works. So that's where we need to make sure that we're thinking about the user here. So as we work in that circle, I've got three kind of things that we can think about to make sure that we're plugging those all in. So to start with, make sure your content is really alive, your content really sings, and that you're developing a content strategy that takes into account static content and dynamic content. So what content on the site needs to be updated on not necessarily a regular basis, but a phone number might change or opening hours might change, and how is that back-end user or the client going to be able to edit that? And then similarly, the dynamic content, this is stuff that keeps bringing people back and back to the site. It might be blog posts or projects, portfolio, recipes. What kind of strategy are you helping build in to keep that content fresh? And then how does that content sing? How does it stack up visually? What's the hierarchy? What are the user interface elements? The next thing we want to think about is that the front end actually works, so it's responsive, it's functional, it's fast, and there's so many great tools that I'm sure you're all aware of. Pingdom tools, Google Page Speed Insights, and browser tools, and real people that have devices in their pockets that you can say, hey, can you just get your phone out and look up this web address and I want you to find X. So, we've seen that, we saw that yesterday, getting actual real users to test things in the real world. And then making sure that the user on the front end can connect into the brand, that they've got something to interact with. Obviously with WordPress, it's such a great community that so many people are developing things for. So there's so many things we can use that are on that WordPress content repository. And then there's also applications that plug in through APIs, and we can do things, we can take things to the extreme and really gamify things on our site, or we can make things that are like normal processes, we can make them simpler, we can make it easier for people on the front end to get in touch. So this is an example that I just wanted to chat about. One of the organisations I work with in Adelaide is TEDx Adelaide. That's like TED Talks, TED Conference in Adelaide. And we've been building our organisation for the past few years. And last year we wanted to bring some really, really top talent onto our team. We needed an event manager and a stage manager. So through the rest of our marketing, one of the things we did was I developed a form on the website using Gravity Forms, which has really great conditional logic that you can take advantage of. We pushed that out to our networks, and then those people on the front end, those people in the wider community who wanted to get involved, as they filled out that form on the front end, it then fed back into a live Google spreadsheet that the rest of our team could access. And so as the applications were coming in, we could see them and we could sort them. You know, this is an organisation that lots of people want to get involved with. And so this was a way that we could kind of funnel it and make it easy enough for us to work through it as well. And as a result, now we brought on a really amazing stage manager and a really amazing event manager who we think are some of the top talent in the state. So that way, that's really brought that full circle, that front end person in the community wanted to get more involved with the brand, and they came through the back end, and now they're part of the ongoing story of the organisation, and that's the kind of stuff that really, really excites me. All right, let's talk about the back-end experience, the back-end user, and because we're talking WordPress, that's the person that is adminning the WordPress dashboard and updating content. And what this person's able to do on that back-end dashboard is going to directly, impact that front-end person, because as they can update content, there's new content coming on for that person on the front to see it and then kind of tap into that community and so on and so forth. But if that dashboard user is somehow disoriented or can't use it, it's slow, it's clunky, it's got lots of holes in it, it's got a billion plugins that they're confused about, they're either not going to know how it works at all, or they're not going to be motivated to go in and change it. And seen this over and over, and one of the talks yesterday kind of covered this as well. But that's so important for that person to be able to hit that content. So what can we do, again, going around that circle, to make sure that the back-end experience is good? A few little things. First up, you can white label WordPress. It's open source. This is such an exciting opportunity. You can edit all of this stuff on this screen, so that back-end user, as soon as they hit that WP admin screen, they're immediately seeing the brand. You can change the logo, the fonts, the colour scheme, and everything. And that's just that connection to the brand before they log in. We can make sure that our tech is purposeful. So rather than just kind of plugging in, or even, this client is a cafe, so I'm going to go to a marketplace and buy a premium cafe theme and just install that, and there you go. Let's think about, does that actually serve them? Does that actually serve the back-end user, or is it kind of clogging up their dashboard with option trees? And there are time and a place for these sorts of things, but I think the key is to be purposeful about it. If you're going to use a page builder plugin or a page builder theme, the client know how to use that properly, and are you actually giving them access to be able to change fonts and change color schemes and end up with like wacky stuff on the front end which doesn't speak to the brand. So some things I love to do, I'm a framework developer, so I work exclusively 95% of the time with Genesis, which is a WordPress framework that has it has an amazing marketplace of child themes that you can buy, or it's actually really easy to build child themes on the fly because they've got hooks, and it's easy to write functions into it. Then taking advantage of custom post types for that user, taking advantage of custom fields, and advanced custom fields is another plugin that I really love for giving those back-end users access to be able to edit the static content that they need to, but not actually change the structure. That's all done back in the HTML, in the page template. And making use of page templates and making use of the WordPress page template hierarchy, because it's actually really, really powerful and really exciting once you start, really getting into it. And then how does that back-end user interact with the brand, the front end, and then also the community at large on the dashboard? So, again, you can edit so much stuff on the dashboard. You can chuck your own link in the footer. You can change the welcome message up the top, and you can change the color scheme, as I've shown, obviously, and you can change the widgets. So one thing I really like to do as a developer is always chuck in a technical contact info. So if that site, if a few years down the track someone else gets to that site and goes, oh, wait a minute, I need to get this done, who do I contact? There I am right there. And, you can also link to your documentation in a widget. You can, you can be creative. And one of the cool things that has come in the most recent update of WordPress was the WordPress events and news widget, which is in the core that you've probably, has everybody seen this widget? It shows you where the nearest WordPress meetup is happening. The next meetup is happening in your local area. Now, instead of, having to go onto meetup.com or whatever, that's right there in the dashboard. Every single day I'm seeing that. Every single day I'm reminded of when that meetup is, when the next Adelaide meetup is on the 6th of August, I think. Yeah, I'll be there. All right, so front and back. Now what about the client? How do we design client experiences? And this I find a little bit trickier and a bit more problematic, particularly because we're actually dealing with quite a young industry. Obviously, computing and software development's been around for a while. Oh no, I went offline. The Wi-Fi dropped out. Talk amongst yourselves. Oh, I'm on Google Slides, so it was online.
You need Wi-Fi for this?
Yeah. Well, it's just dropped out. Oh no, hang on. Yeah, go over to the next tab. Sorry. Just go to the next tab. It should, yeah, and click present. I think it just reset it, but it should still work offline. Yeah, all right. No, I think I'll be right. I can do it. I can make it work. Oh, they should be right there, though, shouldn't they?
Do you need them? I can set up speaker.
No, that's all right. I can deal with it. Ah, sorry. There we go. All right. And we're back. All right, so the client experience, problematic because we're dealing with quite a young industry, even though software and computing's been around for quite a while. The web's only been around since 1991, so a web developer, a web designer as a job has only been around for, less than 30 years. And WordPress has only been around since 2003. So again, it's like an angsty millennial that's still like going through some growing pains. So what I think, some of the problems that we see in this industry is being able to communicate the value of what we do to clients, and more, this is becoming easier, but we still see people who just don't really understand, like, oh, what, you just website, just whip up a website, that's, easy. Has anybody here ever been asked to work for exposure? You heard that before? Like, this will be really good for your career, and, there's probably more work later on, there'll probably be paid work later on. Or really low budgets that they just don't take into account all of the work and the years we've spent, going to university or, self-learning or, building up our own little like repository of software that we've paid for and that we've learned how to use. So, these are big systematic issues with the industry, and we can't solve that with a Venn diagram, but just going to, again, offer 3 things that we can think about in that circle to help build on that client experience, to help design that. So, first of all, specialise and position. If we're working in this industry, what other than like a WordPress developer or a web designer, like what's your thing? What do you love? What do you do that is different to everybody else? Maybe you're an icon designer, or maybe you're a plugin developer or whatever. You'd still be you're still that umbrella thing, but where are you? What's your real niche there? And then how do you communicate what you do? And then how do you find other people that kind of float in different parts of that spectrum, and how do you connect into those people? That's the button. Nope. Technical difficulties. Okay, celebrate failure. Failure is one of these things that, we're sort of taught is a bad thing, and if we fail, then we should just stop trying. But anybody here who's ever written software or played with code knows that you can work on a problem for so long and break things and tear your hair out, but that moment when you finally get it, it's like magic. You feel like jumping out of your chair and dancing. So, take backups. Don't be afraid to break things. I love this project from Google. I don't know if it's still a Google thing, but it's the Project X, which is the Moonshot program or Moonshot project. Has anybody heard of that? It's like they come up with these amazing ideas, way insane ideas that are going to change the world, and then bring together the best talent from all over the world to work on those projects. And their goal is to fail. Their goal is to knock that project off their radar, because that means they're closer to solving the problem. They've eliminated something. So this one here, the Project Loon's probably one of their most famous one. That's this idea that they can get, balloons that float all around the world and that beam Wi-Fi to everybody, and where they kind of when one floats away, another one floats in. And they've deemed this project a failure because it hasn't failed. And so it's still going. But basically, whenever a project fails, they and have a big party and talk about what they learned. And so when you fail, you learn. I heard the other day that to fail is a first attempt in learning. So once we do that, where we've learned, we've gotten better, and we're closer to actually be able to come up with solutions that are really, really, really effective. And then lastly, foster relationships. How can you have good experiences if you don't have good relationships? So this is relationships with your clients, with the people you're working directly with. How do you communicate the value of everything to them? How do you set expectations appropriately? Yesterday, I know contracts were mentioned. I think contracts are so important, no matter how big or small the project, to both keep the client to account and keep you to account. And then how do we connect and foster our relationships as a community? This is obviously a great example of this, because we're all here, we're all connecting and talking. And this kind of collaboration is really what's really going to help us continue to deliver these amazing user experiences. So one thing I'd like for everyone to think about, today and going forward, is where do you fit on this spectrum? Where do you kind of move? And you know, if there's blank spaces, how are you going to, you know, take that top-down point of view, put yourself in there, and then work out how to fill those blank spaces in? It might be through upskilling yourself. It might be through finding resources online, finding more software and plugins that can facilitate that. Or it might be through connecting with people who move on those parts of the spectrum and kind of coming together in these teams. So we can see that from what I've said today, it's, you know, like it's not this front to back binary, and then the client's over there. It's really a circle that overlaps, and it's that concentric circle. You know, when you're dealing with a front-end experience that has content that totally sings and technically works, that has a way for the people out in the community to get in touch with the brand. And when you're dealing with a back-end experience that really empowers that back-end user to update the content, and that they actually want to go into the dashboard and they're excited to go in there, and that it actually connects them to something else beyond that. And that when you're dealing with your client, when you're designing experiences for a client, that they understand the value and they want to pay for it, they want to pay more money. And that they know that there's this amazing community, that this industry that we're all working in is vibrant and is providing value. Because, you know, we're talking about the web, we're talking about websites. It seems like, I don't know, sometimes it seems like a menial sort of thing, but we care about creating really good websites, and we care about creating good experiences because, you know, reliable, relevant actually helps people. And, you know, websites actually build businesses and help businesses grow, and they might even provide a revenue stream for a family. And, you know, provides a job for all of us, and we love working with this industry and helping this industry grow. And so that's why, that's why I really think this works. That's why I've moved my business to this model. Previously, I was kind of like hopping around and doing, over here, yeah, right, I'll do some copywriting, and then, yeah, okay, I'll like develop this web app for you. But, you know, really, now I'm really defining where my talents are here, looking at it from top down and then plugging people in. And I think no matter where you are on that spectrum, you can do that. You can take that top-down approach, even if you're the client, you're your own client because you're building a WordPress website for yourself. You know, taking that top-down point of view, I think is what's going to help us design really great experiences across the spectrum. So, thank you. Thanks for listening. And yeah, I don't know if we've got time for questions or if anyone wants to share their own tips or their own ideas for good experiences in either of those, any of those circles or any of those overlaps. Happy to discuss. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the question was, should you use Genesis? What's the difference between using Genesis and Understrap and then like your kind of marketplace themes? And so there's a big difference between the frameworks and the marketplace themes, because the marketplace themes are like ready to go, whereas the other ones, Genesis and Understrap, are frameworks. So they're like, they've got the components to build a theme. So they've got the header and they've got the sidebar, the footer, the idea being that you can build your child theme and hook those in and then like, you know, add your PHP and then your CSS. But in terms of difference between Genesis and Understrap, I'm familiar-ish with Understrap, but I haven't actually used it myself. I'd say, when I started using Genesis, I just dove head first into it and then like basically never looked. But I'd say play around with it. It's not expensive. It's like $40 to buy the framework, and then you get a free sample theme that you can start like messing around with. So honestly, have a go, and the worst thing that's going to happen is that you choose not to go forward with it, but you've played around and you understand how it works. Yeah, so yeah, have a go. Yeah.
Normally customizing stuff means diving into other people's code and then finding where to change. And with Genesis, if you stick to it, you learn, you develop a base of knowledge. Typically, all you have to do is look for what you're trying to find, and then add the word Genesis to it, outcomes and answer.
Yeah.
And gradually, you don't have to search anymore because you're using the same framework. Well, yeah. Why would you want to spread yourself thin and buy 50 different things and then have to dive into the code to know what to change? In Genesis, you already know. I'm just talking about developing my own things from scratch.
Yeah.
Doing my own from the base thing.
So yeah, the framework gives you the components. Yeah.
The sample child thing gives you the structure, and then you can give it a different skin with CSS, and then books, just do your own thing. Anyway, questions.
Thank you, though. That was really helpful.
Investment and
Yeah.
having a young industry
Yeah.
plus, and so what are your main selling points? How do you sell to a client? Like, give a scenario of something where you had a client that was difficult to convince that you're adding serious value in the way that you do things because they just want to.
Well.
How much for a website?
Yeah, how much for a website, right? Does anybody know how to answer that question, really? That's so hard because, you look at clients and you go, all right, I want to work with this client, or, this is an okay job and I need to pay my bills. But for me, when the clients get to that point of like, why should we pay for this? Then honestly, like, I'm not really interested in working with that person. And it is really hard, and sometimes you do have to like take a really hard standpoint and say, well, you've brought me in to talk about this with you, and I've proposed this to you. I'm a professional. I've got this experience. You justify yourself or not. Like once you start going down that path, that's when you've got to ask yourself, do I really want to be working with this person? What's this relationship going to be like on a long-term basis? And that's why I think like it's tricky because that's a real micro level example, and I think it's a macro problem. So I don't know. I didn't really answer the question, but yeah. Yeah.
I'm trying to find times where I can actually have something. You go quick, and I don't waste my time. I have a trigger that goes, okay, this person's not worth it. I won't spend more time with them. Off to the next client, and trying to find out how to manage my time. So I don't use half my day making proposals, and that sucks.
It sucks. Yeah. Yeah.
Has anyone got any tips on that? Like how to sort them out, like sit through, quickly.
I have the exact same problems, and I usually bounce off of other people that I know are better at like client stuff and sales stuff. So I'll go like, this is what I've, this is kind of the brief, and this is what vibes I'm getting for the client, and I can usually get pretty good feedback that way. Sorry, you had another part to that which I've now forgotten, but yeah. Not wasting too much time, once you think about like, am I really going to get this pitch or, yeah, I don't know. Oh, we've got a solution over here?
It actually ties
Yeah, and because money is such a big thing, often like with some clients, you got to ask them straight up, do you have a budget? Do you understand what this will cost? And if they're a bit wishy-washy about it, then that's kind of a red flag. But if they straight up say, well, yes, we understand that this is something we need to get a professional in for, and our budget is looking here and here, then that's a better sign. Yeah, pre-qualifying is massive. Yeah. You good?
And on that as well, like a lot of people don't want to put prices on their website. I actually found it for me to put some prices on there, not everything, but just so people are aware that this is what they kind of start from. So if your budget isn't anywhere near that, don't even email me,
Yeah.
But my actual question was about customizing the dashboard and the login page and stuff. Do you have particular plugins that you like to use?
I do it with code. Yeah, so that's what I'm saying, like be careful about, there are plugins for that, but whenever you're plugging something in, you're trading off something else. That's how I see it. So you could be slowing something down, or you could be putting in a security loophole. Same goes when you're writing code as well. But that code is not very hard to use, the code I'm talking about, and I've got links for how to do that, which I can send. It's literally like set up a customs functions plugin, copy and paste. If you can access your FTP, yeah, you can do it. And I'd recommend anybody working with WordPress to like have a go at the code. Just have a go, yeah. Mm. So Genesis, you basically install the framework as kind of like a parent theme, and then once you've got your Genesis installed in your WordPress, it's like anything that gets updated. Like once that updates, you get your little update and click it. If you're dealing with child themes or you're doing your own child themes, you'll need to be on top of that. But yes. Depending on the developed, yeah.
Their child themes never get updated.
Yeah.
So they just keep
The main framework, it's every, it's kind of like the WordPress updates. If there's a security vulnerability, they'll push out an update. If they're introducing a new core feature, they'll push out an update, If you've built it solidly and you're working with Genesis, I think you can turn on the automatic update. If you know that things are rock solid and you've got backups running, you can automate all of that. Automate your backups, yeah.
I think it's about time
Cool.
for morning tea.
Yeah, cool.
Cool. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks for having me. Good one.